My name is Gwen Hollister. I'm 35 years old, and I've worked my way up to become the Strategic Partnerships Director at a multinational software firm. I'm not someone who expects life to be fair, but I do expect my house to still be mine when I come home. I had just gotten off a 13-hour flight from Tokyo, bone-tired, dehydrated, and hungry. The international launch I had been spearheading for over 8 months had finally gone through. 3 signed contracts, a standing ovation in a foreign boardroom, and a half-hearted glass of cheap champagne at the Narita Airport Lounge to celebrate. I didn't even bother to order an Uber. I wanted to see my beach house again, the one place I could breathe, be still, and feel like I belonged. But as the cab slowed down on the familiar curved road near Clearwater, Florida, a pit opened in my stomach. My house looked off. The lavender bushes I had planted were dry and brittle, their soft purple wilted to a dusty gray. The white gate had a new keypad lock, and the handcrafted tile sign with my name, Gwen's Haven, was gone, as if I had never existed here at all. I stared, then blinked, then got out of the car slowly. I tried my key. Once, twice. It didn't even fit. A third attempt, and nothing. I took a step back, cold air pooling in my chest despite the Florida humidity. Had someone broken in? A squat? A robbery? Number. Everything was too neat, too deliberate. That's when I pulled out my phone and called my mother, straight to voicemail. I called my father. He picked up on the 3rd ring. "Hey, sweetheart. Back already? You should swing by the house. We need to talk." No explanation. No alarm, just that casual tone he used when he was about to gaslight me into believing something absurd. 15 minutes later, I was standing in my parents' living room, the one I grew up in, the one that felt more like a showroom than a home. Lana, my younger sister by 6 years, was sprawled across the white leather sectional like a spoiled heiress. Her sun-kissed skin still glowed, and her nails were painted a shade of coral that screamed Santorini. She was swiping through photos on her phone with a grin. "Oh my God, Gwen, you have to see this one. We were at this underwater restaurant off the Amalfi Coast, like literally under the sea. Private chef, Dom Perignon on tap." I didn't speak. I couldn't. My mother was busy in the kitchen, avoiding eye contact. My father was watching a rerun of some old sports game, beer in hand. When I didn't say anything, he finally turned the volume down, looked at me, and said it. "Your house paid for their fun." He said it just like that, like we were talking about a gym membership or an oil change. I froze. "What?" I asked, voice barely a whisper. He shrugged, as if he were doing me a favor by repeating it. "The house, the one you're so attached to. We sold it. All cash. Closed in 10 days. Real good offer." "You sold my house?" "Yeah." Lana needed time to recover, Gwen. She was devastated after Marco dumped her. We thought a luxury trip might help clear her head. I stared at him. At Lana, now giggling at a TikTok she had filmed on a yacht. At my mother, who still refused to look at me. I heard my own voice speak, but it felt far away. "You sold my house while I was in Tokyo?" "It's just a house," Dad said, waving a hand. "You're doing well. You can always buy another. You're the successful one, remember?" The words felt like slap after slap. The entitlement, the ease, the absolute certainty that this would be fine, that I'd just move on. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I smiled. Not because I was okay, but because I knew something they didn't. "Why are you smiling?" my father asked, squinting at me. He didn't like not knowing the answer. "What's so funny, Gwen?" I looked at him calmly and replied, "Because the house you sold wasn't yours to sell." He blinked. Lana looked up, and in that split second, the temperature in the room shifted. They didn't know, and I wasn't about to explain it. Not yet. Because revenge, when it comes, should be quiet, legal, and deeply satisfying. I wasn't always this composed. I learned stillness the hard way. Growing up, I was the firstborn daughter in a family that never quite knew what to do with me. From the outside, we looked fine. 2 professional parents, a nice house in Tampa, birthday parties with piñatas and too much cake. But inside our home, the dynamics were quietly brutal. Love was rationed like a limited resource, and Lana got the lion's share. I was the achiever, the straight A student, the one who remembered to set the table, who packed her own lunch at 10, who helped mom file receipts on Sunday evenings. When I won the spelling bee in 5th grade, my father said, "Of course you won. You're Gwen. You always figure it out." It wasn't praise, it was expectation. Lana, on the other hand, was sensitive. She cried easily, got anxious in crowds. She needed extra attention, extra space, extra time. When she got a C- in math, my parents called it progress. When I got an A- in calculus, my father said, "What happened?" I was 13 when Lana had her first full-blown tantrum at a restaurant. She screamed because her chicken fingers had parsley on them. My parents didn't scold her, they apologized to her. We left early, and they stopped at McDonald's on the way home so Lana could get what she really wanted. I wasn't even asked if I was still hungry. That was the first time I realized I was expected to adapt, to always yield space. "You're strong, Gwen," my mom would whisper whenever I showed the smallest sign of discontent. "She's not like you. Be the bigger person. Just let it go." I let it go for years. 16th birthdays are supposed to be memorable. Mine was a modest dinner at home, store-bought cake, a single gift, an external hard drive for my school files. I thanked them, of course. 2 years later, Lana got a backyard bash with a rented tent, a live DJ, and a Tiffany bracelet. No one said a word about the difference, except my grandmother. Margaret Collins, my mother's mother, was the only person in our family who saw things without the fog of favoritism. She never played the "that's just how families are" card. She called things as they were. She'd lived just across town in a small craftsman-style house with creaky floorboards and peach trees in the backyard. Whenever home felt too sharp, too loud, or too lonely, I would bike to her house, 3 miles, always welcomed. She'd hand me a ginger cookie, sit me at the kitchen table, and listen without rushing to fix me. "You don't have to twist yourself into silence just to make space for others," she once told me. "Your voice matters, even when no one claps for it." She had been a school teacher for nearly 40 years, and she believed in systems, structure, documentation, planning. After her retirement, she volunteered at legal aid clinics, teaching young women how to read contracts, bank statements, and leases. Sometimes I think she knew what would eventually come. When I graduated high school, I didn't get a car. I got an old laptop and a bus pass. I worked 3 jobs during college: front desk at a dorm, waitress at an all-night diner, and freelance data entry on weekends. My parents contributed nothing. They said it was character building, said I was lucky to have scholarships. Meanwhile, Lana tried college 3 times, dropped out each time, and got a new iPhone after every meltdown. "She's struggling, Gwen. It's different." By the time I was 27, I had already paid off my student debt and was managing regional accounts for a Fortune 500 company. Lana was still living at home, unemployed, trying to figure things out. The last real conversation I had with my parents about fairness was 2 years ago. I asked carefully if they had any plans to support me the way they supported Lana. Maybe a small investment, a cosign on a property, anything. My father laughed. "You're not the type who needs help, you're a doer." And that was it. That night, I drove to my grandmother's house one last time. She had passed away 6 months earlier, and her house had been sold by then, but I parked across the street and just sat there. The porch light was still on. The wind rustled the peach trees. I remembered the last gift she gave me before she passed. A silver pin shaped like a compass, engraved with the letter G on the back. "Not for Gwen," she said, "but for guidance. If life ever tries to shrink you, sweetheart, you find your true north again, even if you have to rebuild it from scratch." She died with a handwritten will and a detailed trust plan. My parents thought they would inherit everything. They didn't. Most of it went into a quiet, little, irrevocable trust. They didn't know it yet, but in trying to steal from me, they had walked straight into Grandma's trap. And I was simply waiting for the right time to set it off. I didn't just buy my beach house, I earned it. Every square inch of that place was built on sacrifice, on sleep-deprived nights, missed vacations, and spreadsheets filled with financial projections that only I ever saw. While Lana posted selfies in new brunch outfits, I ran back-to-back client calls and picked up consulting gigs on weekends. For 5 years, I lived like a monk in a micro-studio apartment, eating oatmeal and meal-prepped lentil soup while stashing every bonus check into a high-yield savings account. 2 jobs, 7 days a week, no vacations, no backup plan. I wasn't saving for status. I wasn't chasing square footage or some Pinterest dream. I was chasing peace. After my grandmother passed away, something cracked inside me. Not the kind of grief that hits all at once. The slow kind. The kind that settles in your ribs like damp air and makes you feel perpetually hollow. She was the only person who had ever made me feel seen without having to perform for it. At her funeral, my father gave a speech about family values. Lana cried dramatically, even though she hadn't visited Grandma in months. I stood silent, clutching the silver compass pin she'd given me the year before. I didn't say a word, but that was the weekend I decided I would find something that felt like her again. A space where I could just be. That's when I started looking. The house wasn't flashy. It was tucked away near Clearwater Beach, a few blocks off the main road, in a quiet cul-de-sac lined with palm trees and sleepy porches. A 1940s Spanish-style bungalow with faded terracotta tiles, arched doorways, and the kind of hand-cranked windows that creaked open like a sigh. The front gate was crooked. The garden was wild. But I knew. The second I stepped into the backyard and smelled the salt air mixed with rosemary and overgrown lavender, I knew. This was it. I bought the house 6 weeks later. Not under my own name, but through the trust my grandmother had quietly built, the one she'd set up specifically to protect me. I had become the sole trustee, a role I didn't fully understand the weight of until much later. At closing, I sat in a room with the title officer and a notary, her compass pin clipped to the inside of my blazer. The seller handed me the keys and said, "She's old, but she's got a soul." That night, I stood barefoot in the empty living room, the hardwood floors cool beneath my feet, and cried for the first time in a long while. Not because I was sad, but because I had built something that no one had given me, a sanctuary of my own. Over the next 2 years, the house became my second skin. I worked late, but always came home to silence and soft waves. I repainted the kitchen in sage, green. I replaced the broken tiles on the patio. I learned to care for the lavender bushes the same way Grandma used to. Gentle pruning in the early morning, never overwatering. I framed her handwriting from an old recipe card and hung it in the hallway. Her presence lingered in the walls like a quiet warmth. No one knew how much it meant to me. So, of course, I made the mistake of inviting them over. It was a Sunday afternoon, just after I'd finished the first round of major renovations. I made lemonade from scratch and set out lemon poppy seed cake on the patio table. I even wore a dress. Part of me, embarrassingly, still wanted to be seen. My mother walked through the living room and immediately commented on the lack of recessed lighting. "It's a little dark, don't you think?" My father examined the kitchen fixtures and asked, "Did you overpay for this place?" "Feels overpriced for the square footage." "And Lana?" Lana walked out to the garden, flipped her sunglasses up, and wrinkled her nose. "It's kind of, vintage, like in a grandma way, not in a cool way." I said nothing. I smiled, because I knew in that moment that they would never understand. They didn't see the weight behind the paint. The nights I stayed up watching DIY videos, the hours spent stripping baseboards and comparing tile samples on a budget. They didn't know that I'd planted lavender not for aesthetics, but because it reminded me of a woman who had once whispered, "Family doesn't always mean fairness." Still, a part of me was hurt. I had built something sacred, and they walked through it like tourists at a garage sale. After they left, I sat on the back steps, watching the sun dip below the roofline. The garden smelled of rosemary and salt. The compass pin gleamed faintly on the table beside me. That night, I made a promise to myself. No one would take this from me. Not legally, not emotionally. This house was mine. What I didn't know then was that my family would try. And when they did, they would come to realize that this wasn't just a house. It was a line. And crossing it came with consequences. 2 weeks before the Tokyo conference, I got called into my manager's office. She was always sharp. Red lipstick, tailored blazers, the kind of woman whose silence in meetings spoke louder than most men's speeches. She gestured for me to sit, then slid a single envelope across the desk. "You're leading the expansion pitch in Tokyo. If we land this account, your name goes straight to the shortlist for regional director." My heart didn't race. It tightened. I had worked for this. Every 2 a.m. report, every double shift. My resume didn't come with legacy connections or a famous last name, just results. I walked out of that office knowing my life was about to change. At dinner that evening, I shared the news. Mom blinked. "Oh, Tokyo, that's far. How long will you be gone?" 10 days, maybe 12 if we get extra meetings." Dad grunted. "Well, just don't bring shame to the company like that intern last year. Remember that guy? Total mess." I ignored it. I was used to applause being reserved for Lana. But to my surprise, Mom's tone softened. "Gwen, while you're gone, I could swing by and water the lavender. You know how delicate they get if you miss the window. Let me help. Just leave me a spare key." I paused. Something in me hesitated. The house had always been off limits. A boundary I kept firm. No one stayed there but me, not even Lana during her breakups. But Mom looked, earnest, hands folded, eyes wide. "I know you don't trust us," she added gently, "but I'm still your mother. I just want to help." My fingers drummed on the table. Then I nodded. "Okay, I'll leave a set under the porch lantern." The night before my flight, I sat cross-legged on the floor of my living room, zipping up packing cubes. I liked packing. It gave me control. Socks on one side, power adapters on the other, predictable, compact, logical. Then my phone buzzed. Lana. The timing was already strange. I picked up. "Hey." She didn't say hello. She was sobbing. "He broke up with me. Brandon. He said I was emotionally unavailable. Can you believe that?" I closed my eyes. "Lana." I gave him everything. I rearranged my entire trip to Napa for him. I booked a yacht, Gwen. "A yacht," I echoed. "You've known him for a month." "You don't get it. You never do. You've always been cold. At least I feel things." I let the silence hang. She'd weaponized that line since we were teens. She sniffed. I want to go somewhere beautiful, somewhere luxurious. I need to heal. Somewhere far, like the Amalfi Coast or Iceland, something dramatic." I tried to respond, but she cut in. "You wouldn't understand. You have your work. You thrive in loneliness." And with that, she hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house, brushing my hand across the kitchen counter, the hallway wall, the window latch in the guest room. Each object hummed with memory. Even the lavender bush outside had grown in just the way Grandma taught me, full but disciplined, stretching toward the sun. I placed the backup key under the lantern as promised. I remember pausing. My hand hovered above it for longer than necessary. Some part of me screamed, "Don't." But I had to catch a 6 a.m. flight, and I didn't want to look paranoid. "Trust," I told myself. "Trust is something you offer freely. Or it doesn't count." At the airport, as I wheeled my suitcase through the terminal, Lana texted again. "Lana, sorry for being dramatic last night. I'm okay now. You're gonna crush it in Tokyo. Can't wait to hear all about it." I stared at the screen. I didn't reply. Instead, I boarded the plane and watched the Florida coastline fade beneath clouds, not knowing that the moment I handed over that key, I had also handed them the match, and they were already walking toward the house with gasoline, Yamulis. I landed in Miami on a gray, bloated afternoon. The sky hung low like it had something to hide. As the cab rolled past rows of palm trees and beachside condos, I imagined my lavender blooming. I had missed it. The 10-day window had come and gone. I pictured my porch, my worn doormat that read, "Come as you are," and the sea breeze sliding through the cracked windows just the way I liked it. I paid the driver, tipped well, and pulled my suitcase toward the gate. That's when the first fracture hit. The porch light was off. Not unusual, but the sensor always clicked on by now. Maybe the bulb had died. I climbed the steps. No lavender. The bush was gone, uprooted, replaced with some sterile row of decorative stones. My heart thudded. I reached for the lantern. The key wasn't there. I blinked, checked again, squatted down to feel around in the cracks. Nothing. Okay, plan B. I pulled out my keychain, fumbling with the familiar cold metal. My fingers shook, not from fear, not yet. Just unease. I slid the main key into the lock. It didn't fit. I tried the side door key. Didn't turn. Garage remote? Dead. No. This wasn't real. I wasn't locked out of my own home. I tried again. Key after key, metal clicking, scraping, refusing. Each failed turn felt like a betrayal snapping into place. I backed away, eyes scanning the facade. The welcome mat was gone. The mailbox had been replaced. Even the porch swing was missing. It wasn't just locked. It was erased. That's when the rain came. A single drop, then a chorus. Sheets of water cascading like the sky had made a decision. I stood there, suitcase soaked, hair plastered to my cheeks, staring at what used to be my sanctuary. Now it felt like a stranger's house. I called my dad. He picked up after 2 rings. "You're back?" His voice was flat. No warmth. "Yeah, I'm standing in front of my house. The keys don't work." "What's going on?" There was a pause. "Come to the house. We'll talk. Bring your bags." That was it. No apology, no explanation. Just, come to the house. Dragging a soggy suitcase down the slick sidewalk, I felt like a character from someone else's dream. The wheels squeaked, my shoes squelched with every step. By the time I got to my parents' front door, my blouse clung to me like wet paper. My hair dripped on the welcome mat, the one my house no longer had. I knocked, the door swung open. There she was, Lana, in a silk robe, hair in waves, skin glowing from what was clearly a facial. She held a champagne flute in one hand, her phone in the other. "Gwen," she cooed, "look who's back from saving the corporate world." She stepped aside casually, like we hadn't spoken since she cried about needing luxury healing. "You look damp," she added, scrunching her nose. Behind her, the house buzzed with music and laughter. A Fabrice. Party? On a Tuesday? As I stepped inside, dragging the puddle with me, I heard Mom's voice from the kitchen. "Gwen's here? Wonderful, come dry off." I entered the living room. There were balloons, a cake, a banner that read, "Bon voyage, Lana." My heart dropped. Bon voyage? Before I could speak, Dad came out from the den. He wore a golf polo and that smug smirk he reserved for big reveals. "Glad you made it," he said. He motioned to the living room, where Lana now posed for selfies with a pink carry-on beside her. "She's going to Santorini, a full month at a private villa. Her therapist says she needs distance. Emotional clarity." I stared. "And the house?" I finally asked. "Oh, that," he replied lightly. "We sold it." Just like that. My mouth went dry. "You... what?" "You weren't using it, and honestly, it was too much maintenance. We figured it could do something good for the family. Help your sister reset." "You sold my house," I said, every word like broken glass. Technically, he shrugged, you signed it into a family trust years ago, and your mother had co-oversight. So yes, we sold it. The deal closed yesterday. Cash wire's already in. Lana sipped her drink and raised her glass toward me. Thanks for the getaway, sis, really. The walls spun. I looked around. Laughter, music, champagne bubbles rising like it was all normal. And me, soaking, silent, standing like a ghost in the home that never loved me back. That was the moment I knew. I had just become the outsider in my own life story. But what they didn't know was what I had already set in motion. The living room was now a glittering theater of Lana's curated bliss. Photos of poolside brunches, villa previews, Greek sunsets, all looped across the smart TV. Lana tapped through slides like a travel agent on espresso. Santorini has these blue-domed cathedrals. So photogenic, she gushed. And I'm getting this private chef? He used to work on a yacht. I'm thinking detox smoothies in the morning, champagne oysters at dusk. I didn't move from the entryway. My suitcase still leaked rainwater on the hardwood. Mom avoided my gaze entirely, fussing with champagne glasses, over-arranging napkins that didn't need arranging. You haven't even offered her a towel, Dad barked mildly. She looks like a stray cat. Still wet. Still quiet. They sold my house, I said flatly, for clarity's sake. You sold it. Dad chuckled. It wasn't just your house, Gwen. You're making this dramatic. Lana swirled her drink, scrolling again. It was sitting empty. That place was wasted on you. My mother finally mumbled, We thought it would be for the best, Gwen. You're always working. You never have time to enjoy it. I looked straight at her. You could have told me. You were in Tokyo. We didn't want to stress you out, she said weakly. So instead, you emptied me. Out? Dad stood taller. Enough. You're acting like this was a theft. This was reallocation. That word. Relocation? He crossed his arms, the authority voice now fully on. It was a family asset. You bought it through the family trust. You wouldn't have qualified alone anyway. Your mother and I simply decided it was time Lana had a fair share. She's been through so much. My jaw clenched. A breakup isn't a war, and using my house to fix her self-esteem isn't justice. It's looting. Watch your tone, Dad warned. I stepped closer. And who gave you permission to liquidate my property? He scoffed. It's not just yours, Gwen. You signed the trust document years ago. It made the home a shared family asset, standard estate planning. I didn't sign away ownership. That was a vehicle for inheritance strategy. I was still the trustee. Not anymore. Your mother had co-trustee rights. We simply acted. Mom looked like she wanted to disappear. You knew what that house meant to me, I whispered. It was a symbol, Gwen, Dad said. Symbols don't pay for spa packages. Lana needed real care. I felt the air shift. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was ideology. They believed it. They felt righteous. Lana has always needed something, I murmured. Because she's fragile, Mom cut in, her voice small. Because you made her fragile, I replied. By giving her everything, by taking from me. Lana tossed her hair. Oh, please. Here comes the neglected sibling monologue. You're not some orphan. You got straight A's, scholarships, a job in Japan. What more do you want? My house, I said simply. I want the thing I earned. Dad rolled his eyes. You're acting like we burned it to the ground. You might as well have, I said. Then I smiled. Not a smirk, not sarcasm, just calm, measured. The room shifted again. Why are you smiling? Dad snapped. Because you think this is done. He narrowed his eyes. Gwen, you think you played a clever game. You don't even realize the rules you broke. He stiffened. Don't threaten us. I'm not, I said softly. But I will need to make a few calls. I pulled my phone from my coat pocket, still damp, but blinking back to life. Dad's eyes followed it like it was a detonator. What calls? He asked sharply. Legal ones, financial ones, possibly criminal. Lana let out a laugh. You're so dramatic. But even she was watching my fingers tap across the screen. I turned toward the door. I'll need the trust paperwork, and a copy of the deed transfer, and escrow communication logs. I suggest you get those ready. Mom's glass clinked softly against the marble counter. Gwen, maybe we can sit down, No, I cut in. I've stood for enough. I reached the hallway. Dad called after me. You won't win. That house was sold legally. Then you have nothing to worry about, I replied. As I closed the door behind me, I could still hear Lana in the background. She's bluffing, right? I let the rain hit my face again, but this time I was smiling for a different reason. By the time I reached Emma's brownstone apartment, my knuckles were trembling from gripping the steering wheel too tightly. It wasn't the rain or the wind. It was what I knew was waiting beneath her porch light. Understanding. And right now, that was more dangerous than any storm. The second the door opened, I collapsed into her arms without a word. Emma, ever the perceptive one, didn't ask anything. She just guided me in like someone rescuing a shipwrecked body. Her living room smelled of cardamom tea and fresh-washed blankets. Safe. Lived in. A place where betrayal didn't fester in the walls. I sank into her couch like I hadn't sat in years. My voice cracked when I spoke. They sold it. Emma blinked, crouching next to me. Who sold what? My parents, I whispered. They sold my beach house. She froze. What? While I was in Tokyo, just gone. Locks changed. My name stripped from the mailbox like I never existed. Her hand shot to her mouth. Oh my God, Gwen! They used it to fund Lana's luxury rehab masquerading as a soul-searching getaway. My dad said it was reallocation. Emma stood, pacing now. That's not relocation. That's theft. You should call the police. Not yet, I said, shaking my head. I have another way. She stopped mid-step, staring. Gwen, they sold your home. What's left to talk about? Because the house wasn't under my name directly, I said. It was part of a trust. Emma blinked. What? I sat up straighter now, finally breathing fully again. 2 years ago, after Grandma died, I set up a revocable trust in her honor. She always wanted me to have something stable, something no one could take away. So I worked with a lawyer, transferred the deed into a trust. I'm the trustee and the sole beneficiary. Emma's jaw dropped. Wait, so technically, you didn't own the house as Gwen Miller? Correct. The Lavender Grace Trust did. Then, if your parents sold it under your name, thinking it belonged to you, they committed fraud, I finished for her. They bypassed a legal entity they didn't understand. Emma sat down slowly, eyes wide. Do they even know that? Number. They thought I was being humble when I said I didn't need my name on the mailbox. She gave a short, stunned laugh. That's genius. Strategic ownership. Did you keep records? Every single document, I said. Digitally and hard copies. The title transfer, the notarized trust documents, the power of direction. I even have email trails from the attorney who handled it. Emma stared at me like I was someone she just met. You planned for betrayal. I planned for peace, I said, but I left a door for defense. Silence hung between us. Then she whispered, What now? Now, I said slowly, I find out how they forged transfer documents on a property they didn't legally control. I follow the money. I trace escrow and title. I speak to my trust lawyer first thing tomorrow. She nodded. Then, a beat later, Can I help? I smiled for the first time that day. Yes, I need someone steady, and I trust you. She rose and grabbed her laptop from the counter. Then let's build a case. As she powered it on, I looked around her small, safe apartment. No lavender here, no beach, no ocean breeze, but it held something else I desperately needed. Sanity. I pulled the silver brooch from my coat pocket. the one Grandma gave me before she passed. It gleamed under the lamp, still etched with her initials. "This house was supposed to be my reset," I whispered, mostly to myself. "Now, it'll be my shield." Emma reached over, gently touching the brooch. "Then let's make sure they regret touching it." Outside, the storm finally began to die down. Inside, something far more powerful was beginning. I didn't sleep that night. While Emma dozed off on the couch beside me, her laptop still glowing faintly, I sat cross-legged on her living room floor with my grandmother's leather folder in my lap, the one I had labeled GG Legacy 2 years ago when we finalized the paperwork. This wasn't just a house anymore. It was a battlefield, and I wasn't walking in unarmed. My grandmother, Grace Evelyn Gardner, was a soft-spoken woman with steel in her bones. The same woman who used to braid my hair and slip butterscotch into my coat pocket during church was also the one who survived a bankrupt marriage after my father siphoned off her savings. He called it a family investment. She called it a betrayal. After she passed, I honored her memory the only way I knew how. I didn't just buy a house, I protected it. I flipped through the thick binder until I reached the tab titled Trust Instruments. The Lavender Grace Irrevocable Trust. Signed, notarized, sealed. I am the trustee, the sole controller of asset management. Beneficiary? Me. Contingent beneficiary? None. The property, my beach house, was deeded under the ownership of a nonprofit housing awareness initiative I formed, Lavender Roots Foundation, a 501c3 shell entity, entirely legal, completely transparent, and airtight. My lawyer had warned me, "This structure is unusual. Are you sure you want to go this route?" I had answered without hesitation. I want the paper trail so tangled that if someone tries to steal it, they'll trip. And now they had. My parents thought they were taking my personal property, but what they attempted was to sell a non-transferable asset held in trust under a nonprofit foundation with a clause that clearly stated any unauthorized occupation, transaction, or claim by blood relatives may result in immediate disinheritance from all residual trust assets. I whispered the clause out loud as I read it again. Any unauthorized occupation. My dad had no idea. He thought he was playing chess with a checkers rulebook. I opened the next section, a signed affidavit from my grandmother, handwritten, sealed. To my granddaughter Gwen, if you are reading this, it means the structure we put in place may have been tested. Know this, I trust you, and I've watched your strength grow through years of being left behind. I believe you will know when and how to act with dignity. Remember, the law is not just a tool, it's armor for those who walk through fire with grace. My throat tightened. I sat back against the couch, breathing deeply. For the first time since I returned, I didn't feel powerless. I felt ready. The next morning, I made my first call to the title company. Yes, I'd like to verify a recent transaction regarding the property at 13 Ocean Willow Lane. There was a pause. I'm sorry, ma'am. Who are you? I'm the sole trustee of the Lavender Grace Irrevocable Trust. I believe the property is currently listed as sold. That transaction is invalid. Another pause, then nervous typing. 1 moment, please. Within 15 minutes, I had the confirmation. The buyer was a Shell LLC in my father's name. The sale had gone through using my birth certificate and a power of attorney form that was forged using an old template from my college bank application. A digital copy was sent to my inbox. My hands trembled as I read the signature. They had forged my name. They had no idea I hadn't owned the house in my name for over 2 years, which meant the buyer never legally acquired title. The sale was void ab initio, null from the beginning, and now, with fraud-involved criminal charges, could be pressed. Mini twist. They didn't just sell the house. They sold something they had no legal access to. My dad would find that out soon enough when the deed gets rescinded and a civil inquiry is triggered. I sent everything, documents, screenshots, transaction history, nonprofit ownership records, to Rachel, my trust attorney, and added one line. Activate Clause 7C, request title reversal, and begin proceedings. Her reply came 5 minutes later. Already in motion. And Gwen, I'm sorry they did this, but I'm glad you were ready. I closed my laptop. No police yet, no shouting matches, no breaking down. Just quiet steps through a legal process they never saw coming. I walked to the mirror in Emma's hallway. I looked like hell. But my eyes? Sharper than ever. They stole a house. But they gave me something else. Proof. And that would be the weapon they never expected me to wield. I've always believed in backup plans. When I bought the house, I had it wired with a full security system, mostly to feel safe since I lived alone. But after years of watching my family twist truths and rewrite history, I added one more layer of protection. A discrete set of motion-activated microcameras, not the visible kind that blink red when you walk by, the kind no one notices, tucked behind air vents, embedded into bookshelf corners, blended into the trim of the hallway mirror. It wasn't paranoia. It was pattern recognition. After Rachel confirmed the legal response was in motion, I sat down in her office and plugged my flash drive into her computer. You're about to see why I didn't freak out when I found the locks changed. Rachel leaned forward. I clicked open the folder marked Pre-Departure Surveillance, April. The screen blinked, and then, Day 2 of my Tokyo trip. My mother walked into my study, alone. She scanned the shelves, opened the drawer marked Private, pulled out my document organizer, and flipped through it with the familiarity of someone who felt entitled. She found the folder labeled Title Deed and Personal POA Templates. She paused, then smiled. We watched her lift out the old copy of my power of attorney from my grad school banking account, a document I hadn't touched in over a decade. She placed it next to a blank deed form, pulled out a pen, and began practicing my signature on a napkin. Rachel's jaw tightened. She forged this, didn't she? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Day 4. My dad entered the frame. Same room, this time with a man in a blazer holding a folder and a tablet. I paused and zoomed in. It was a real estate agent. He pointed to a printed brochure I recognized as an online listing page for my beach house. My father nodded, shook hands, patted the man on the back. I clicked next. Day 6. Lana burst into my bedroom with her phone in selfie mode. OMG, imagine me sipping mojitos on a white sand beach, manifesting... She held up a red bikini, twirled. Then, holding a straw hat, she added, Thanks, sis, I deserve this. I fast-forwarded to the final clip. Day 8. My mom again. She sat at the kitchen island, laptop open, scanning through cruise packages and private villa rentals. On the table beside her sat a checkbook with my father's name on it and a sticky note labeled $198,500 wired. I switched tabs on Rachel's screen and opened the bank statements I'd pulled from my joint trust financial account, one my parents didn't realize was flagged for internal activity reports. There it was. April 12th. $198,500 withdrawal from trust escrow wired to Ocean Bloom Escapes LLC. April 14th, $9,850 withdrawal. Starlux Yachting Company. April 16th, $17,200 charge. Vital Lana Days Spa and Resort. Rachel squinted. That's your sister's name in the resort. Yes. Apparently she named a vacation package after herself. How quaint. Then I opened the most damning piece, a high-res screenshot of the fake signature on the deed transfer. It was mine, but the loop on the G was off, and the tail on the W sagged too far left. To the naked eye, maybe nothing. But I had 6 forms from government filings, passports, and loan approvals to compare. Overlaid, they didn't match. Rachel leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. This is textbook financial fraud. Forgery, misappropriation of protected assets, your parents committed multiple felonies. I nodded slowly. They sold a house they didn't own, using a name that wasn't theirs, for a vacation they couldn't afford. She gave a low whistle. You weren't just ready for this. You anticipated it. Because I've spent my entire life watching them treat me like a wallet with legs. I stood up, unplugged the drive, and slipped it into my bag. Now it's time they learn what happens when the daughter they underestimated decides not to stay silent. We didn't need drama. We had evidence. We didn't need a scene. We had the law. And the best part? They had no idea what was coming next. I hadn't seen Harrison in years, but the moment he opened the door to his office, it felt like stepping into the last piece of my grandmother's legacy. He had aged, grayer, slower, but sharper than ever. "Gwen Walker," he said, extending his hand warmly. "You look like your grandmother every time you frown." I didn't realize I was frowning until he said it. "I need your help," I said. Again. I laid out everything. My Tokyo trip, the forged documents, the hidden cameras, the trust, and the money trail. When I finished, he didn't speak for a moment, just steepled his fingers, then exhaled slowly. "Do you have the trust deed with you?" I handed it to him. He read silently, then tapped his finger twice on a specific clause. "Irrevocable family trust, established in 2007. Trustee Gwen Walker. Clause 14b. No party, including biological relatives, may convert, reassign, or distribute trust assets without express written consent from the trustee. Breach of this clause triggers permanent disinheritance." He looked up at me. They didn't just break the law, they broke the trust, literally and legally. I nodded. "Can we stop the transaction?" "We already have." He smiled thinly and leaned back. "Thanks to the way your nonprofit is structured, and because they never actually had legal claim to the property, the sale isn't enforceable. The buyer may think they own the house, but they purchased an asset that wasn't legally transferable. That gives us every right to file a fraud complaint, void the transaction, and initiate both civil and, if you wish, criminal proceedings." That was the part that twisted something deep inside me. Criminal proceedings, against my own parents and my sister. I felt my stomach tighten. I didn't come here for revenge. I came for restoration, for fairness. But when someone burns your lifeboat while calling it a gift, you don't hand them the matches again. Harrison opened a drawer and pulled out a legal folder. "Here's what we're going to do. First, I'll draft and send a notice of rescission to the buyer, notifying them that the property they purchased is under trust protection, and the sale is void due to fraud. We'll also send a cease and desist to the agent who facilitated the deal." "And the police?" "Already on my call list. I'll report the forged documents and the bank transactions. This isn't just conversion, it's willful fraud, embezzlement, and identity misrepresentation." He paused. "Gwen, do you want to press charges? If we go criminal, this won't stay quiet. It could end with arrests, headlines." I didn't answer immediately. I thought of Lana posting selfies by infinity pools funded with stolen trust money. I thought of my mother telling me she'd take care of the lavender. I thought of my father's smug smirk when he told me my house paid for their fun. I didn't want headlines. I wanted witnesses. I want them to realize what they've done. I want them to lose not just what they stole, but what they thought they could keep. He raised a brow. "What does that mean?" "I want them to face it in front of the family, the same family they've lied to for years. I want the truth to be exposed, in their own living room." Harrison's lips curled upward, just slightly. "Ah, you're not trying to destroy them in secret." "No," I said quietly. "I want them to destroy themselves, with their own mouths, their own hands, and I want every aunt, uncle, cousin, and neighbor to see it." He didn't argue, he simply began writing. The plan was set in motion within hours. Harrison contacted the buyer, who panicked upon learning they had bought a contested trust asset. The agent? Already backpedaling, claiming they were misled. As Harrison prepared court documents, I drafted something else. A formal invitation to a Walker family brunch the following Sunday at my parents' house to celebrate Lana's return from her luxury trip. They loved being admired, Worshipped, center of attention, perfect. They'd set the stage for their own undoing, and I would be ready with evidence, law, and calm clarity. No screaming, no chaos, just truth. Clean, cold, and irreversible. I met them at Harrison's office, a young couple, maybe early 30s, visibly nervous. The woman clutched a folder of paperwork. The man looked like he hadn't slept in days. "You're Gwen?" the woman asked. "The real owner?" I nodded. "Well, trustee technically. But yes, this whole mess revolves around my property, and I know none of this is your fault." They exchanged a glance of quiet relief. For the first time since walking in, their shoulders dropped slightly. "We're not trying to steal anything," the man said quickly. "We were told everything was clear. Full title, legal documents, inspection passed. We believed we were buying from the rightful owners," the woman added, her voice shaky. "A family just in transition." I sat across from them and offered a tired smile. "You were deceived, just like I was, but I don't plan to let you carry the fallout." Harrison stepped in with the printed legal documents and started walking them through the invalid transaction. Their offer, their payments, everything was null due to fraud. The home never legally left the trust, and any contract signed without the trustee's approval was void. "You're not liable," Harrison said. "You will get your money back, and if you're willing, you can help us." The man blinked. "Help you? How?" "By being honest," I said. "Just tell the truth. What they said, how they acted, how quickly they pushed the deal, who signed the contracts." "Would we have to go to court?" "Possibly," Harrison answered. "But you'd be on the right side, and we'll protect your interests." They both looked hesitant. Then the woman said, "We were just trying to start a life." I nodded. I was too. Later that evening, Emma came over, her laptop in hand. "You're going to want to see this," she said. She had been quietly pulling together a digital dossier, screenshots, timelines, metadata. Lana had posted dozens of Instagram stories over the past 2 weeks. Beachfront views, brunch towers, champagne bottles clinking. One photo had the caption, "When life gives you lemons, sell someone else's house and sip martinis." Cringe-worthy, but useful, even more damning. A Facebook post from my father showing off his new ride, a luxury black SUV parked in the driveway. "Bought with trust funds," Emma said. "Their comments are public, Gwen." I leaned in, scanning through relatives praising the car and joking about retirement in style. Then I noticed something else. Timestamps. Lana had tagged her location. Every day, every movement. The paper trail was digital, dumb, and utterly indisputable. "Let them brag," Emma said. "We're archiving all of it." I stared at the screen, jaw tight. They turned my pain into a vacation and flaunted it. And now it becomes evidence. The young couple called me the next day. "We'll testify," the man said simply. "We can't believe they lied like that. We trusted them." "They called it a quick estate sale," the woman added. "Said their daughter was moving abroad and didn't need the place anymore. Said they had full rights." Her voice shook again. "I feel so stupid." "You're not," I said. "You were scammed by people who use family as a cover." There was a pause. Then she said, "Let's help make it right." That night, as I lay in Emma's guest bedroom, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the silver brooch from my grandmother, the one shaped like a lavender sprig, the one she gave me when I was 17 and too numb to cry after being forgotten at Lana's birthday. "Family may fail you," she once said, "but you don't have to fail yourself." Now I had allies, Emma, Harrison, the young couple, and soon an audience. Because the truth wasn't just rising, it was ready to bloom. I called David that evening. He was my cousin on my mother's side, the kind of person who listened more than he spoke, who always stayed neutral in family drama, but somehow made you feel safe. "I need your help," I said, my voice even. "Say the word." I explained everything. briefly, efficiently. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I laid out the facts like I was reading a case file. He was silent for a long moment. You want me to help you organize a gathering? Not just any gathering, I said. A reckoning. He exhaled. Where and when? We chose a riverside restaurant. Private dining room, big enough for 20. David had connections with the manager and secured it without question. I paid the deposit up front. Emma helped me with the logistics. We mapped out where everyone would sit. My aunt, my uncle, old family friends, people who had celebrated Lana's promotions but barely texted me when I published a peer-reviewed article, people who followed my dad's boating posts but didn't know I'd been to Tokyo for work. You really want to invite them? Emma asked, eyebrows raised as she scanned the list. Yes, I said. Because the people they pretend to impress should hear what they've done. We installed a small projector. Each chair had a name tag. There was no buffet, no music, just a pitcher of water at each table, and a printed folder in front of each seat. What's in the folder? David asked. Facts, I replied. Deeds, statements, screenshots, bank records, legal notices. He looked at me for a long second. You've changed, Gwen. No, I said quietly. I just stopped apologizing. The morning of the dinner, I dressed simply. Navy blazer. No jewelry except the lavender brooch my grandmother once gave me. My hair tied back, face calm. David handled the invites. Every guest had received a personal message from him. Family gathering, Gwen will share something important. Please come. No one refused. Curiosity always outranked loyalty in our family. As I stepped into the restaurant, Emma stood beside me, clipboard in hand. You sure? She whispered. I nodded. This isn't revenge, Em. I'm not here to humiliate them. I want the truth to breathe, for once. The guests trickled in. Chatter filled the room. My mother arrived, flustered and holding a pie. My father wore that same smug expression, the one he wore when he negotiated car prices or talked down waiters. Lana arrived last, in heels too high and a dress too short for a family function. What is this? She said, frowning. An intervention? Something like that, I replied. Everyone took their seats. The room quieted. I walked to the front and faced them. Thank you all for coming, I began. I know you were expecting a family dinner. What I'm about to share may change how you see some people, including me. And I'm okay with that. My voice didn't shake. This isn't about bitterness or payback. It's about a truth that's been ignored for too long and a house that was never just a house. I gestured to the projector. The screen lit up. First slide, the deed of trust. My name, my grandmother's signature, the clause about inheritance violation. Next, video footage. My mother at my desk, going through my files, my father shaking hands with the real estate agent, Lana twirling in a sundress, champagne in hand. Gasps rippled through the room. I didn't look at my parents. I looked at the others, the cousins, the aunts, the old neighbors. I wanted them to see not just the fraud, but the silence that enabled it. They called it a family resource, I said, voice steady. But this was theft. And every time you liked a post or turned a blind eye, you told me this was okay. Some lowered their heads, others stared blankly. Lana stood up. Are you done? Is this your little revenge party? I met her eyes. No, Lana, this is your mirror. As the last slide faded, I looked at my mother. She was crying. I didn't feel triumph. I felt released. After everyone left, Emma hugged me tightly. You did it? I shook my head. Number. I'm just beginning. Because justice doesn't end with exposure. It starts there. And then you build? That evening, the room was warm with low golden lights and clinking silverware. The river shimmered quietly outside the tall windows of the private dining hall. Candles flickered gently along the center of the table, casting soft shadows on the linen. Everyone had arrived. My father sat near the head of the table, chuckling as he recounted a story about negotiating the price of a fishing boat. My mother sipped white wine beside him, her smile strained but practiced. Lana sat at the far end, laughing loudly, flipping through photos on her phone. "Santorini was divine," she gushed. 5-star everything. I needed that trip so bad. Honestly, best therapy ever. She turned to me with a smug smirk. "Thanks for funding it, sis." My fork paused midway to my mouth. I set it down slowly and folded my napkin. "Actually," I said calmly, "there's something I'd like to show everyone." The room fell quiet. Chairs shifted, eyebrows lifted. "A short video," I added, standing up and walking toward the small projector we had placed earlier. Emma dimmed the lights with a quiet click. The screen came to life. First, footage of my mother sneaking into my study, her face close to the desk lamp as she pulled open my locked drawer, flipping through documents, pausing, taking a photo, hand trembling slightly as she forged my signature on the power of attorney. Next, my father shaking hands with the real estate agent, his voice faint but clear enough to hear, "She won't even know it's gone. She trusts us. That's how you know it works." Then, Lana twirling in the hallway with a champagne bottle, laughing, "I can already see myself on that yacht." There were no sound effects, no dramatic music, just reality. Raw, silent. When the video ended, the lights slowly brightened again. No one spoke. My mother's face had drained of color. My father looked like someone had pulled the rug from under him. Lana clutched her phone like a shield. What is this?" my father finally stammered. I looked around the table. Some of the guests were looking down. Others stared straight ahead, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. "This is what happened while I was in Tokyo," I said softly, "while I was presenting at an international conference, representing my firm, while I trusted my family." Lana scoffed. "Oh, come on, this is ridiculous. It's just property. You act like we stole a kidney." I didn't flinch. "You stole something far more valuable," I said. "You stole trust, legacy, respect." At that moment, the double doors opened. In stepped Harrison. He walked calmly to the front of the room, placed a thick legal file on the table, and cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I'm Harrison Rhodes, legal representative of the Whitmore Family Trust. I'm here to inform you that, following a detailed investigation, the actions taken by Mr. and Mrs. Lancaster, along with Ms. Lana Lancaster, constitute serious breaches of fiduciary trust law." Gasps rippled through the room. "Forgery, fraudulent conveyance, misuse of trust property," Harrison continued. "The property in question, the beach house, was never legally owned by Ms. Gwen Lancaster, but held in irrevocable trust for the long-term benefit of a non-profit foundation she oversees. The attempted sale is null and void." He turned to my parents. "Additionally, under Clause 4C of the trust, any beneficiary who engages in unauthorized use or misappropriation of trust assets automatically forfeits all future inheritance benefits. That includes," he flipped the page, "the $500,000 remaining in principal, the family boat, stock dividends, and secondary properties allocated to the three of you." Lana stood up so fast her chair screeched backward. "You can't do that. This isn't fair. That house should have been part of the family estate." "It was never part of the estate," Harrison said evenly. "It was your grandmother's final act of protection, one you ignored." The room was frozen. My uncle coughed uncomfortably. My aunt reached for her glass with a shaky hand. Then came the sound of approaching footsteps again. 2 uniformed officers entered. "Mr. and Mrs. Lancaster," one officer said, "we have a few questions regarding the forged legal documents submitted during the sale of the property. You're not under arrest at this time, but we request your cooperation for formal statements downtown." My father's jaw tightened. My mother's hand trembled. "You called the cops on your own parents?" she whispered, her voice cracking. I looked at her, quietly, calmly. No, I said. The trust did. You're so selfish, Lana snapped, tears now pooling in her eyes. All these years, you think you're better than everyone. You just want control. That's all this ever was. I turned to her, my voice level, steady. No, Lana, I just stopped letting people sell off my value, my silence, my worth. You're unbelievable. Maybe, I said, but I'm finally not invisible. The officers escorted my parents and sister out of the room. No one clapped, no one toasted. They just sat there, some ashamed, some stunned. And me? I sat back down. I picked up my fork. I finished my dinner. Because justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it eats quietly, right across from the people who once devoured your trust. The house smelled different when I stepped back in. The door creaked the same way. The floor plan hadn't changed, but something invisible had shifted. The lavender plants had withered in their beds. A wine stain marked the rug in the living room, and the walls, once a soft eggshell, were now streaked with greasy fingerprints and scratched paint. This was no longer a home. It was a crime scene. I didn't cry. I made tea, walked barefoot from room to room, and let the silence speak. The next morning, I hired a crew. We tore out the old floors, replaced them with warm wood reclaimed from an old chapel. Emma helped me pick soft greens and sky blues for the walls. She brought sage and a small bowl of salt water and conducted a cleansing ceremony in the living room, whispering, "Let this place hold only what honors your soul." We planted fresh lavender out front. I wore gloves, kneeling in the dirt, letting my fingers work through the soil like therapy. I whispered a thank you to my grandmother, feeling the breeze brush my cheek. Room by room, I rebuilt, not just with paint and furniture, but with peace. This wasn't about forgetting. It was about reclaiming. A few weeks later, I filed the final paperwork. The nonprofit was official. The Gwen's Haven would serve as a sanctuary for young adults who had been emotionally displaced by the people who were supposed to protect them. It started with a scholarship fund, then a series of weekend workshops, financial literacy for the emotionally independent, how to rent your first apartment, setting boundaries without guilt. I partnered with local counselors, reached out to college advisors. We created a mentorship network, matching volunteers with teens who needed not just advice, but consistent, trustworthy connection. Every wall of my rebuilt home held a story, a lesson, a light. The living room became our meeting space. The patio hosted quiet book, circles. The garage turned into a resource closet. Clothes, laptops, journals, all donated. One evening, I stood by the garden as a young woman named Kiara watered the lavender. She was 19, soft-spoken, and recently cut off by her parents after refusing to follow their career plan for her. "It smells like calm," she said quietly. I nodded. That's the idea. I didn't tell her the roots of these plants once drank my tears. She didn't need to know. What mattered was this. Pain, when processed and repurposed, becomes legacy. My grandmother would have loved that. The text came on a Wednesday, first from my mother. A long message about regret, and family should never go this far, and we thought it was for the greater good. Then from my father, stiffer, more transactional. We acknowledge mistakes. Let's find a path forward. Finally from Lana, I was manipulated too. I didn't know everything. Maybe we can talk? I sat with those messages for a full day. I didn't feel anger. Not anymore. I felt distance, like I was watching them from a cliff, safe, while they flailed in a storm of their own making. I didn't block them. I didn't reply right away either. That night, I lit a candle, opened my journal, and wrote the final line I would ever send. Family isn't just blood, it's respect. I hope you learn that before it's too late. Then I pressed send. That was it. No dramatic slam of a door, no fiery comeback, just a gentle closure. One born not from vengeance, but clarity. I didn't need to make them suffer. Life was already doing that. I had my home, my lavender, my purpose, And most importantly, I had myself, no longer waiting for permission to be loved, valued, or heard. The smoke from the grill curled lazily into the late summer sky. I stood barefoot on the deck, tongs in hand, turning corn and veggie kebabs while laughter rippled from the backyard. Emma was teaching a group of scholarship kids how to play croquet, badly. David was assembling folding chairs with one of the interns. And somewhere, someone had started a playlist that mixed Motown with soft indie tunes, exactly the kind of weird blend that somehow just, worked. The air smelled of rosemary, charred pineapple, and lavender. My lavender. I glanced at the front yard. The blooms swayed gently in the breeze, resilient and fragrant, just like I hoped this home would feel to everyone who walked through it. Today wasn't a party, it was something deeper. A circle. A warm, open, ever-growing circle of people who weren't bonded by blood, but by intention. Respect. Choice. I excused myself from the grill and wandered toward the porch swing at the far end of the yard, a place no one really sat except me. I curled into the seat, a lemonade in one hand, and reached into the small wooden box I kept nearby. Inside was the old letter, creased, faded, familiar. My grandmother's handwriting had softened over the years, the ink barely clinging to the paper. If you ever feel like there's no room for you in your family, then maybe you were meant to build a sturdier home. One where people come not out of obligation, but love. One where you get to decide what belonging looks like. I held the page close to my chest. My eyes burned, not from sadness, but from the fullness of everything this house now held. I had found healing, not from making them pay, but from building something better. The door slid open behind me. Kiara, one of our first scholarship recipients, peeked out. "Hey, Gwen, we're about to bring out dessert. You want first dibs?" I smiled. "Only if there's peach cobbler." "There's two." She winked and disappeared again. This was the family I had chosen. Not perfect, not polished, but honest, present, kind. I rocked gently on the swing, letting the sun kiss my shoulders. "I did it, Grandma," I whispered. "I really did. Before we say goodbye, we'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee, or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Let us know in the comments. We read everyone with gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel. Not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that still believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with us today, wherever you are. We hope you carry this story with you, and remember, sometimes the miracle doesn't knock on your door. It waits quietly until you're ready to open your heart. Take care, and we'll see you in the next story.